This podcast is a member of the Place to Be Nation family. Visit us at placetobenation.com.
One of the most fun and mind-bending podcasts we have here on the OG, Old Reliable. Welcome to this month's episode of Through the Looking Glass. I am your co-host, Scott Criscuolo. It has been a lot of fun, these first 7 episodes. We've gone all around the timelines of professional wrestling. We've kind of stayed in WWF/E. We did one WCW episode. We'll dive into some other stuff in the coming months. But you know, we know you OGers enjoy us any topics involving the flamethrower. Speaking of flamethrowers, I'm just going to bring the guy in right now because he throws flames from the other side of the ball of mud that we call Earth. He is an OG himself. He's done plenty of stuff here on the network. He has done some stuff from over our friends at the No-So, the North-South. The Thunder from Down Under. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, Mr. Dave Hall. How are you?
Hey, Scott, I'm having a lovely day. Today's a nice day. I've got the day off work. It's really nice weather down here in Australia for once. We've basically had rain almost every day since the beginning of February. So after the floods have receded and we all got off our arks with all the animals, we're able to sit down and enjoy the day. No, I'm doing really well today, mate. I'm really excited. This is I've really been looking forward to recording this episode with you. Not so much for the content, but just I really feel we've got the ball rolling, and it's really, really grateful to everyone who's joining us and listening, and I really appreciate the journey that you guys are coming on with us. So I'm really excited about the way this journey has been going.
I agree with you 100%. Every episode, I say it every episode. I'm not going to get into all the topics now, but again, this episode, just to let everyone know, this show is not this is not episodic in the sense that you have to listen to them in order. They're all standalones. So if you're listening to this right now and this is the first time that you're putting this podcast on, hi, welcome. Feel free to keep listening. You're not missing anything from the first 7 episodes in terms of what we're talking about tonight. But when you're done with this one, feel free to please go back to the top of the catalog with episode 1 and listen your way through, because Dave and I have had a ton of fun every month that we've done the show, and it's been part of kind of the new breed of shows that have dropped here in the PTB Wrestling Network, along with PTBN's Pedestal and YouTube Roulette and a lot of the other great new shows that have come down the pike, along, of course, with our other OGs. Speaking of OGs, we'll have a new episode of the Place Be podcast this coming Monday. We recorded a couple days ago, but JR and I will be doing Royal Rumble 2008. We are entering 2008 of pay-per-view. And just to let everyone know, a future topic that Mr. Hall and I will be doing down the line will involve a guy in 2008, a personal favorite of mine. So we will be doing that topic down the line, so stay tuned in the coming months for that. It's been a great time, and I love the fact that we do a different topic every month. I'm looking at the numbers. Thank you so much for your support, both here on the website and when you follow us on Twitter at PTBN Wrestling. We do all sorts of polls and questions. As a matter of fact, I think later today, if you're listening to this on the day it drops, which is Wednesday, I think Wednesday here in our side of the world. For Dave, it's some other day that the Star Trek Enterprise is flying through another universe. Go on our Twitter at PTBN Wrestling, and I think we may do a question that is pertaining to the topic tonight, and your thoughts on it. So again, we've had some great stories: CM Punk, Ultimate Warrior, Scott Hall, Goldberg, the Rumble, Mania, just all sorts of great topics. Tonight's topic is not unpredictable. I think this is a very easy looking glass topic, because this is one that's talked about by a ton of wrestling fans, considering one of the biggest superstars in WWE at the moment had a similar journey, and his was executed. What happened to that guy did not happen to the guy we're talking about tonight. So, Dave Hall, why don't you set the table for us? Get us started.
Yeah, well, look, I think, for many of us, those of us who've been wrestling fans for a long time, one of the things that I think the WWF likes to put out there, likes the part of the image they like to present is that Vince McMahon and his the people he works with like to listen to the fans and like to really see the fans interact with things and respond to the way the fans are reacting. And I think that one of the most famous examples of that is the rise of Stone Cold Steve Austin. The fans started to build behind him and they turned him face. And obviously we had the great career of Stone Cold. The same could be said for The Rock. The Rock's face turn was both heel turn and face turn were predicated on the reactions that the fans were giving their growing presence on the show. But I think one of the biggest criticisms of the World Wrestling Entertainment for the last, we're probably looking at nearly 20 years now, has been the fact that there has been occasions when the fans have clearly indicated their position on a particular superstar and the company haven't taken it on board and maybe run with the idea, run with the opportunity to build into that and turn someone face or heel. And I think the biggest example of that has been the career of John Cena. John Cena has for many years of his career, he was the person the fans loved to boo and yet was consistently presented as a face. And you consistently read through the time when it was happening. I remember, my fan journey, living this through, and I know you would have been living it through, Scott, as well. We consistently saw on the internet, whether it be chat sites, forums, the early days of Facebook, people throwing out there the need to turn John Cena heel. When are they going to turn John Cena heel? And they never did. Vince never did. And I'm obviously talking about after his fan-encouraged face turn in 2003, 2004. We're talking about after that, when he's been on this journey of the top face of the company. They never turned him heel again, despite the fact he was one of the most heavily booed people in the company. And so the question has to be asked, was there ever a right time to turn John Cena heel again? Would it have worked, and how might that have looked? And I think that's what we're going to explore today. That's our topic as we go through the glass today is, could a John Cena heel turn have worked? I think it's a really interesting question, especially when you look at, and we'll get into this very shortly, when you look at some of the things that have happened in recent years. I think it's a really, really interesting thing to consider. And we'll get to that in just a moment. But Scott, I want to ask you, John Cena's been around since 2002, and I know he's pretty or semi-retired now, but he made his first appearance on SmackDown in what was it? It was probably around this time, around that May, June 2002, I think, when he made his first appearance on SmackDown and sort of had that match against Kurt Angle, and then had that match against The Undertaker to sort of really get his name noticed. So he's been around a while. What were your early impressions of John Cena?
Well, I remember, let's look back for a moment, Dave, to 2002 WWE. F. It started as an F, ended as an E.
They got the F out.
They got the F out. That's so ridiculous. And if you want a good, and I tell you, I've been enjoying it immensely. If you want a great snapshot or journey itself into that year, check out the Ruthless Aggression series that is on, for those like Dave overseas, the WWE Network, for us here in America, of course, on Peacock. The Ruthless Aggression series. They have different chapters on different aspects of different topics pertaining to Ruthless Aggression. One of them is indeed John Cena. There's one on Evolution. There's one on the women's division. There's one on Hollywood Rock. There, a bunch of the SmackDown 6, like all that stuff. Well, sort of the SmackDown 6, more like SmackDown 5 and the mystery 6th guy. Uh, and there is one episode on John Cena. And I remember looking back, and I knew that 2002 was the year that we were going to be in transition. The Monday Night War was over. We won. If you're a WWE fan, if you're a WCW fan, you didn't. But we were usually a fan of both, so we won. Period, as fans. We had, of course, Steve Austin leaving. We had the controversial took his ball and went home. That was in June, or was it late May? I think it was early June because if you remember, he left because he didn't want to not put Brock Lesnar over. He didn't want to put him over live on free TV with no
build.
With no build.
They were booking him. It was going to be a build up, like a first round or a preliminary match in the King of the Ring tournament. So absolutely no build at all.
No, and you're talking about a guy that, arguably the best of all time, and just gave you his entire body and soul for a whole year in 2001 with the invasion storyline and such. So he had no problem putting over Brock Lesnar, build it up to put him and I in the finals and have us wrestle at the King of the Ring pay-per-view. Nope, we want to do it this way. And they're like, well, you're treating me like shit. Goodbye. So that happened. The Rock was kind of in and out. He came back. And, of course, he obviously was going to win the title, therefore, to get the belt on Brock Lesnar. So the company as a whole was kind of in a strange state of flux, as with the Attitude Era, or as the Ruthless Aggressive Era would indicate. Also, I definitely would love to promote a great podcast over on the other side of the quad. Our good friends at the No-So have the Jake Williams does the Ruthlessly Aggressive podcast, which is an exceptional snapshot. I did an episode actually with Jake of SummerSlam 2002. So check not just that episode, but check out all of them. They're all great. So when John Cena first walked out, I'm like, who's this fucking meathead? I mean, like, yeah, he had the boring tights and the spiky hair, and he was freaking ripped. And I'm like, oh, this is such a Vince guy. Look at him.
Yeah, he screamed white meat babyface.
Yeah, he was about as exciting as ice cream. That's about as exciting. I mean, he was literally about as exciting as a nap. That's about as what he's. And I'm like, are you joking? And he ended up having a couple of matches with Kurt Angle. So I got to be honest, Dave, I was not impressed. I was not impressed coming out of the gate. He was just blah. We also saw the debut of Orton. So Randy Orton during the stretch. So we're talking about the class of 2002 OVW, which of course, as you know, was freaking loaded during the Attitude Era when WWE was on fire. Meanwhile, down in Kentucky, you had Brock and Shelton Benjamin and John Cena and Randy Orton, and I mean, it's just the place is just loaded.
Yeah,
Batista. I mean, it was jacked. And now it was time with the Attitude Era over. Austin on the outs. Rock clearly ready to go to Hollywood and do that. At the time, we didn't have a Shawn Michaels. He would eventually come back as part of the NWO, which was stupid. Then he had what would be one of my favorite matches with Triple H at SummerSlam 02. But we didn't know when, at the time, he was supposed to be sticking around. So the company needed a little freshening up. And it was time to kind of open the floodgates from OVW and get these studs in there. And Cena was just so bland. So I got to be honest, Dave, when I first saw him on TV, I went, this guy's going to last about 5 months. And that's pretty much the end of that.
Yeah.
And, so I don't know. What about you?
Yeah, look, I think I had similar thought. He didn't capture my imagination right at the beginning. I mean, he came in and he had that I mean, he had a solid match with Kurt. I mean, Kurt can wrestle anyone. Kurt Angle could wrestle the broomstick and make you think the broomstick will beat him. That's how good Kurt Angle was. And so
yes, he was.
To have this match with Kurt Angle that sort of Kurt Angle comes out looks like he's just survived. Well, that's Kurt Angle. And I think that was more the Kurt Angle storyline that they were doing at the time rather than anything about John Cena. They did the match with The Undertaker. And again, it felt more it was about The Undertaker maybe being caught by surprise. He gave his respect afterwards. But, I mean, it really Cena did not seem like he had anything to him. And he wasn't really promoted as much anyway. Like, Orton came in as the third generation superstar. Like, you know, I mean, he was young. They hadn't sorted out his character yet or his gimmick. But the fact of the matter was Orton was brought in as at the same time, and this is all the brand split, just after the brand split in the draft, and they needed extra people to build up. So Orton came in being promoted as a future star. This guy is third generation. This guy has all the bloodlines to make him a legend. Like that was from the beginning, and Orton got injured quick, but Orton was always promoted as this guy's going to be a star. Batista came in as he at least came in with a character. It might have been the worst one in the world. Maybe we've got to do a Batista thing one day. But I mean, coming in as Deacon Batista for the Reverend Devon. I mean, it was bad. But it was
terrible.
But it was that bodyguard sort of thing. But they were able to transition that. They got rid of the religious element, switch him over to Raw, put him in Evolution, and he's with, he becomes that. Initially, I always felt it was like a bodyguard sort of thing for Flair and Triple H. But, he was doing that sort of gimmick. His size made him stand out. Batista's size made him stand out. Cena just came across bland, and there was nothing to him. He didn't really talk. He didn't really do much. He came across white meat babyface, takes a bit of a beating, tries to get the fans cheering for him. It's what they brought The Rock in like, and it got the same outcome. I mean, everyone knows that, The Rock was brought in with that, slapping hands and, smiling, and everyone turned on him, and then they turned The Rock heel, and the rest is history. Cena had that same feeling. He was smiling and doing his best, and he just didn't stand out. And I didn't think much of him, and I don't think anyone. I mean, the company likes to put out this perception. Whether you listen to the DVDs, you talked about the Ruthless Aggression series on the network, whether it's that, whether it's, interviews over time, John Cena DVDs, or whether it's, that time period DVD or whatever, interviews with anyone, they try to put out this thing of, from the moment we saw John Cena, we knew he was money. We knew he was destined to be a star. But I don't believe that for 1 minute, because that's not how he was presented. He was not presented in that way. Of that early crop that came in, I feel he was presented with the least backing and the least push and the least anything behind him of that group we've just talked about. And it wasn't until that whole Halloween Vanilla Ice thing happened that they started looking at doing anything with him. And the rumor mill that runs around is that he was basically on the verge of being released when that occurred.
Yeah, I mean, he was, and after the Jericho stuff, and then the Jericho stuff, the Kurt Angle stuff, and the match with Taker, he ended up just kind of getting mishmashed into the mid card, and was eventually just turning. He was looking at the lights more than 1988, 89 Honky Tonk Man, and you knew that if this guy wasn't going to get his act together, he was in deep shit, and was, gone. But we saw, he kind of got that kind of hip hoppy thing going on through, that came from his childhood in West Newbury, Mass.
The Vanilla Ice thing.
Yeah, exactly. And then, he started doing the, and this is where I actually started to attach myself to him, because as some of you probably know, listening to some of our other shows that I'm on, I am a sports jersey collector. So I have a pretty decent cachet of jerseys in my closet. So when that gimmick started and he started wearing different vintage sports jerseys, I was like, all right, I think I can kind of hook on this now. Like, this is a nice little gimmick. So to his credit, Dave, Cena realized I have to take care of myself or I'm screwed. And sure enough, he did that. He took care of himself and he figured something out. He figured out what he could do to, get over with the crowd. And that was it. The heel turn was kind of cool. He ended up hooking up another guy that was probably about to get fired, Bull Buchanan, B2. And he spent most of 2003 as a pretty valuable cog in SmackDown's mid-card. He ended up getting a kind of a random title shot at Backlash with Brock. He wrestled Taker. He had some decent moments that kind of led him into 2004, and then we'll go from there. But remember the episode of SmackDown where he got to smack Stephanie McMahon's ass? So, he felt he got to kind of smack her in the butt. So that, he was getting over. He was, and the best part about it, Dave, and I'm curious your thoughts here. He got over very simply. It wasn't rocket science to get him over and to figure out something to get him over with the fans. It was very simple, very organic, not forced, like another guy later in the following decade, that would be a problem. That would be forced. Well, you know who I'm referring to, and now he's the head of the table. Yeah. Similar situation, but in this case, at least early on, the fans were okay with it because he was in the mid card. The top of the card on SmackDown at that moment was Kurt and Brock, and they were still feuding over the world title. So Cena had a chance to kind of sow his oats and stretch his wings a bit and kind of build his character without a lot of pressure.
Absolutely. It was that organic thing. It's like what I was saying at the intro there about sort of Austin and Rock. Like, it was an organic thing. He found a character that worked. He plugged into the freestyle rap thing and tagged into an arrogance. I love the way he would tear down. It was the whole jersey thing was the wearing the opposing, like wherever they were having the show, wearing the jersey of like the hated opponent or the rivalry thing. And he did such a good job and it built, but then, like every good character, the fans started to latch onto it because he was entertaining. He found something that worked. It became entertaining. Yep. And to be fair, he worked hard in the matches that he was having and was organically growing. And you could see that. And the impact was the fans started to respond positively to his efforts to be a heel. Sounds like Austin, sounds like Rock. We've been down this path before. And the WWE responded, and then they organically turned him babyface. And he goes, I remember that sort of coming into that Survivor Series match where he got looped into the I think it was Eddie Guerrero's Survivor Series team against Kurt Angle. He was like the last member of the team to join whatever. And they built him, and then they were able to build him into that following year. He wins the United States title. He goes into a series of that mid card character development was happening. I remember they toured Australia. He did the best of 5 with Carlito or best of 7? Who did he do that? That wasn't with Carlito. It was with Booker.
No, it was with Booker. Booker. Yeah,
they did one of them.
I'm pretty sure it was best of 7. I think it
best
was 7.
Of 7. Yeah, and they did one of the matches down here in Australia on tour, and I was actually at that show, and that made a good kick because it was a house show, but they really talked up. This was one. I think it might have even been match 1 or match 3 of the series, but they even talked it up, and then they referred to it the following week on Raw, on SmackDown, that it had happened. But it was this organic build-up. He was being built. He was growing. He gained that popularity. He reaches the pinnacle of the SmackDown brand. He wins the title at WrestleMania, WrestleMania 21. Totally deserved it. he had been built organically and the fans were behind him and it all looked so good for him. He wins the SmackDown one. Batista wins Raw against, Batista had his organic turn. And you really felt like you had two stars on the rise that were going to dominate the company for years to come, who the fans had built, which is what wrestling was all about. But then something happened later that year. Something happened that the fans started to turn on him. And I guess I want to ask you the question, Scott. What in your opinion was it about? I've got my opinions, but I want to hear yours first. What was it about John Cena why did the fans start to turn on him in that sort of late 05 into 06? And I mean, it happened well before One Night Stand. We know that. Well before One Night Stand 06 against RVD. It happened long before then. It was happening in late 05. So what do you think it was about Cena that the fans started to turn against? Because it had been so organic, and his rise to the SmackDown title was natural, organic, and fan-led. Why did they turn on him?
I think a lot of it had to do with the opponents. Let's remember that when the build started at the beginning of 05, of him, building to the world title, he technically tied Batista at the Rumble, that year in Fresno. I think it was in Fresno. And then remember Vince, something weird happened and Vince came out all pissed off and he ended up popping both his quads. And, it was obviously supposed to be, Batista winning, but Batista fell out with Cena. So the best thing about 05 was that you had these two guys that were both over, Cena and Batista, and the thing was Batista needed to win the Rumble because because him, quote, making a decision involved Triple H and the whole Evolution breakdown. Like, it had to happen.
Yeah.
So Batista needed to win the Rumble because that was part of his storyline. So Cena ended up doing a tournament on SmackDown, and here's the weird part. Him and Kurt Angle wrestled in the final of that tournament at No Way Out 05 in Pittsburgh, which was, Kurt's hometown. Cena won, and Cena got a great pop. Fast forward to WrestleMania, and the funny thing about that match is that at the time, JBL, and this might be a topic, just a random topic for another day, JBL was finally, I think, getting over as a great heel. Like, I know a lot of people thought his the heel turn and the title win over Eddie and everything in that run was pretty lousy. First off, the matches he had with not to go off topic, but it's kind of building me up to the WrestleMania 21 match. Cena, JBL had those two lousy matches with Undertaker. And by the time we got to like Armageddon 04, JBL was finally getting over as a heel, and his title reign actually started becoming kind of cool. And by the time we got excited about it, he was losing. He would end up losing the belt to Cena at WrestleMania 21. Now, at this point, Cena and Batista were split up. So obviously, a lot of people think both of them winning that night was overkill. Maybe one of the matches should have ended schmozzy. But Vince loved both guys. He loved Cena. He wanted them to both get their moment at WrestleMania. And that's exactly what happened. So, they just obviously, in terms of the overall sculpture of the company, Vince thought that Batista Triple H was a little meatier of a match than JBL and Cena. Now, Cena was over like crazy because he wasn't JBL. So he would win the rematch at Judgment Day that year in an amazing rematch, that I Quit match at Judgment Day 05 in Nashville?
Oh, I can't remember. I think it was a great match.
I think it was Minneapolis. Yeah, I think it was Minneapolis. It was an awesome match. Then he moved to Raw. Then after the Triple H Batista feud ended, they flip-flopped. Cena would go to Raw. Batista would go to SmackDown to freshen up the feud, the matchups. Cena would feud with Jericho. I have a point coming, Dave. Don't worry, I have a point coming.
That's all right.
Cena would because the opponents is what is the key thing for me. That's why I want to focus on his opponents, because it's the opponents that leads to the crowd switch. That's why I'm getting at. The matches he would have with Jericho that summer, they'd have the match at SummerSlam. Then the next night, if you remember, they'd have a rematch the next night. Jericho lost, and he would, quote, get fired from the company. Of course, Jericho was leaving to go do Fozzy stuff and would be back in a couple years. But who jumped him that Raw, if you remember, that Raw the night after SummerSlam 05, and restarted the feud? Well, the answer was Kurt Angle. Now, twice before in John Cena's career, he hooked up with Kurt Angle and got the benefit of the doubt because Kurt was an awesome heel. Plus, it was kind of more of a mid-cardish feud. But now you're at the point, the crowd was like, all right, Cena, you've had a great run as champion. Time now for you to lose to a heel and kind of rebuild yourself. And then Kurt Angle comes along, who, as you mentioned, is a wrestler's wrestler, a fan favorite. And when they saw that, they realized, okay. Now it's time for Cena to lose the title and do rebuild and so. But then when he started winning, Kurt didn't get the belt at Unforgiven 05. And as the year was continuing, suddenly it's like, oh, Jesus, this freaking guy's not going to lose. And then the fans were like, all right, we've kind of had enough of this now. And the jorts and the ugly looking shirts. And yeah, that stuff started to, the male fans are starting to get like, oh, Jesus, he's not cool anymore. You know what's funny, Dave? It kind of reminds me, if you think about it, of Diesel. We've talked about Diesel on past episodes. Diesel was cool when he was a heel. Then, end of 94, he turns babyface, wins the world title, and suddenly he's not really as cool as he was when he was a heel. Same thing here. He was not cool anymore. He was a dork. And the shirts were getting uglier, and when the guy fans started realizing that the chicks were cheering him and the little kids were cheering him, they're like, oh, screw this. I'm not rooting for the guy that the chicks like. Seriously. And from that point on, the male demographic wrestling fan made it a point to not cheer John Cena. Because at that point now, all of the opponents that he would face from here on out were all guys the male fan liked more. And it really took a turn when he started feuding with Edge. When Edge cashed in that Money in the Bank, Dave, at New Year's Revolution 06, that Albany crowd went batshit when Edge cashed in on Cena. I don't think it would have worked with anybody else. But Edge was a heel. Or was he? And here's where you get the weird crowd dynamic for the next, I would say, 6 years.
I think it lasted longer.
Do you really think so? I want to talk.
Yeah.
I want to dive into that. I'm glad you said that. I kind of want to get a little bit later on. I want to kind of get into where we think it turned, but that's where I think. I think the reason the fans turned was because the opponents started getting more male fan friendly when Cena started becoming less male fan friendly. If that makes any sense.
It does. And I think you've hit it pretty well there. I think the opponents was a big thing, especially who Cena ends up facing when he moves over to Raw. Like you said, Jericho and Angle, both very popular with wrestling fans and guys who were always popular heel. Like they might be presented as the heel, but everyone loved them. Those two in particular. But I want to take it back a notch because I personally think it's not just the who they're wrestling. I think that the root cause of it lay in the brand switch, in switching him and Batista over the brands, because what I felt was happening, and I remember there was a bit of backlash when it happened, when they did that, or there was a bit of online backlash at that point, because the thing was Batista had the organic turn of Batista and the turning on Evolution, and Batista, how he was presented, there was something special about what they'd done with that turn that, I agree with what you said. His storyline with Triple H was the biggest storyline going into Mania. And coming out of Mania, he had his rematches, but he was presented as, he wasn't this musclehead. He was very intelligent. He was clued into what was all the shenanigans that Triple H and Flair have been trying to pull. That I love that build-up of his storyline where Triple H and Flair would be Triple H he's cloned himself. There's two of him. Maybe that's what was going on. There's two of him all these years.
That would have been the greatest thing in the history of wrestling, Gabe.
Well, I think
episode.
Hunter was wanting to build to a match with himself. I'm sure of it. Triple H and Flair would be talking behind Batista's back and making fun of him, and then you get those camera shots where Batista was listening in and he knew what was going on, and the whole storyline had been built around he was very intelligent, and the fans really rallied and I took to him. So when his feud with Triple H was finished, he was without a shadow of a doubt the number one guy on Raw, and in fact, I believe in popularity stakes, he was the number one guy in the company at that time. Probably, maybe second to Undertaker. Undertaker's got that. We put him on a separate pedestal. We won't include him in that conversation. But Batista was the number one guy. And then they went and did the brand switch. And Batista goes to SmackDown and Cena comes to Raw. And I think there was an element where I think a lot of fans were annoyed that Batista's just finished the series with Triple H. They're ready for him to start facing the other guys, the Jerichos, the Angles, that we want to see him start to move through some of the other guys and have some series of matches with them. I think that was part of it. Then all of a sudden we've got Cena coming over, having those matches instead, and Batista goes over and he gets the feud with JBL, who you talked about how good he'd become, and yet very quickly he felt just as old. Like he felt like he reached his use-by date by the time Batista came over, and you had this, another match, that sort of carried on. So I feel that the fans were a bit upset that the company took the guy they saw as number one in the company, moved him elsewhere before he had a chance to have these matches, and then bring Cena over and push him the exact way Batista had been getting pushed. And I think a lot of fans were looking at it going, this should be Batista's story arc still, not Cena's. And I think that was the start of it. they then had him go over the Jerichos and the Angles, and then everything that you started saying, I think that was sort of the follow-up. But I think that movement was the foundation of it. And there are a lot of people who did not like that. And I was one of them. I love Batista. I think I'm very high on Batista.
Me too.
And I really, really wish that they had not. They could have switched them 12 months later. They could have done it the following year. Let them have a year in the brand and work other guys. And then once they've exhausted all that, switch them over and let them have the same run against the opposite guys. And I think it would have worked better. But, as we said, the fans started turning on Cena and it, Edge, and then they put him in that one night stand match against RVD was the biggest standout. I mean, he was always going to get booed in that setting. That was an amazing night, that show. Yes. I really wish I could have been there. I mean, living down here in Australia, we just get to see it on TV and DVD, but right. I really wish that's if there's any show I look back historically and go, gee, it would have been cool to be in that crowd. I think that would have been one of them. And then you look at what they did. Like you talked about, the fans were cheering these guys that were who the guys liked against Cena. So then the company went and did what they did with Hogan. Well, let's start putting him against all these monsters, against all these guys that are massive, and who's the monster of the month sort of thing. And Cena has this run to try and counter that. Like if we take away the Angles and the Edges and the RVDs and the guys who people are going to cheer against him because of who they are, maybe we can get him cheered against these other guys. But I think by then the ship had sailed and everyone was sick of him. Like you said, he wasn't cool anymore. And then the perception of he's being pushed down our throat starts to... It really felt like they're booking him the way they booked Hogan. This is just the new Hulk Hogan. Face the big monster, overcome the big monster, move on to the next monster. And it was the WWE's, I think, to counter the crowd, to try and get people to be sympathetic to Cena, but it wasn't working. It didn't work. And I think that's, that's something that they had they were battling with for years afterwards.
Yeah, the funny about the One Night Stand 06 match, Dave, is that that may be the first time he, even if it was just for half an hour, he embraced being the bad guy just a little bit, because he knew he might as well have not even tried, because he looked out there in the demographic and he looked at that crowd, and 98.7% of that crowd were 25 to 45-year-old guys who either A, just hate his guts, or B, were old school ECW fans who truly hated his guts. And in the ring, next to maybe Tommy Dreamer or Shane Douglas, you had the face of ECW in the ring in Rob Van Dam. And you're going to walk out there and do your cute little dance and all your bullshit. Cena's like, you know what? Fuck them. They don't like it too bad. So my legitimate favorite Cena moment in those first many years was his entrance at One Night Stand 06, when he's like, you know what? I'm just going to walk down the aisle, hold the belt up in the air, and say, I got it. He doesn't. Fuck you.
And it was very reminiscent of the character that he had been as a heel. It was like he tapped back into that early Cena character to play it off, because he really just, it was that very much, I'm the man, and you can all just get stuffed.
Pretty much. And he knew, like, all right, if I throw my shirt in the crowd, none of these fucking clowns are going to keep it. So what did he do? Threw the shirt went back. Threw the shirt went back. It was classic. And I'm going to quote our good friend, good old Will from Texas. It was classic, like Lawler, Austin Idol, Memphis of the mid 80s. Ham the crowd up for a good 3 or 4 minutes, get them just all swole and like ready to fight. And that crowd at Hammerstein that night might have been one of the greatest crowds of the last like 15, 16 years at one single show. Even more than '05, because One Night Stand '05 was a nostalgia show. That was it. One Night Stand '06, however, Dave, they did put some elements of the current creative product in there now. Vince was like, all right, I've had enough of this vintage ECW shit. We're going to do it my way now. And, but having like the Bischoff guys up there, well, this was '05. That was kind of fun. But the best part of it was Cena not caring.
Yeah.
The problem was it was only for those that wanted a heel turn, it was just that one night in that one setting. And he knew that Monday night he was going to be back where he wanted to be with the 20,000 fans, 11 and a half of them girls and 10-year-olds, and I'll be back where I belong. So if there was ever an inkling of what could be a pretty sweet John Cena heel turn, that half hour of the main event of One Night Stand '06 was probably it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was, and look, for all those people, and I'm sure there's none of them that listen to this podcast network, but for all those people out there who would say Cena can't work a match, can't wrestle, and can't work a match, and there's two elements there. There's the grappling and the technique, and there's the ability to work the crowd. You watch that match, you can't deny that Cena can work, and that's a common thing. Like, you watch a lot of his matches, you can't deny Cena can work. He was very good, not just with what he did in the ring, but with how he dealt with the crowd at times. The problem was, too often, the way he was written as a character, he'd shrug it off. Like the whole, in later years, it was the whole, you can cheer for who you want and who you can boo for who you want. And that's what I love about the universe. And isn't everyone great? And I'm just going to continue to smile and go on. And that, I always found that more frustrating than anything. I would have rathered at least what we saw at One Night Stand with the, well, you're not going to like me tonight. I'm still going to be true to myself, but I'm the guy. I think, you had a bit of a, he played it himself that night. At other times, it was written in a bad way, and and I think it impacted his presentation over the years. But we could talk about Cena for a long time. But I want to ask this question before we start looking at some of the things like you just suggested. One at '06, and we'll probably come back to that shortly. But I want to ask, why do you think that WWE never pulled the trigger on a heel turn? Now, for Cena, and I ask it with us now having the benefit of seeing how successful Roman Reigns' heel turn has been. Now, Roman Reigns was being pushed very similar to John Cena a few years ago. It was he's our number one guy. We're going to push him. We don't care if the fans boo him. We're still going to just keep presenting him as the face of the company, which is what they did with Cena for years. I don't think it had the same impact that it had for Reigns. It didn't have the same impact with Reigns that it did with Cena. But then we've got this heel turn with Cena, with Reigns, that's just worked amazing, and it's been such a great character development for him. So we can see that it worked. We don't have this. I mean, obviously Cena's career is all before that, but we can see that WWE still know how to do heel turns that work and can still write a compelling character arc and a journey that draws the fans in, that can take your top babyface, make him your top heel, and fans will still respond to that guy as the face of the company. Why did they never do it with Cena, do you think?
Merchandise. I think for a long time, I think Vince was nervous about sales of merch, because let's be honest, Dave, a decent hunk of the merchandise sales of John Cena stuff is bought by girls and young kids, like young boys, like in their, toddlers into their, pre-teen. By the time you're a teenager, you're digging Edge because he's, having sex shows in the ring and has double entendres and hot women around him, and other such heels, and even tougher baby faces. But for Vince started to notice, and it's changed now because the T-shirts, a lot of them have gotten pretty solid. A lot of the T-shirts in the mid 2000s were not great. And Cena's shirts were successfully being bought by kids and females. So I think Vince was always scared of biting the hand that fed it. And a Cena heel turn, because guys are very picky about their T-shirts and their wrestling merch, Dave. I've been that way. I'm sure you are too. For years and years. I'm very picky about T-shirts. Let me tell you something. And I'm honest when I say this. There have been some Triple H T-shirts that I didn't buy because I thought they were pretty butt ugly. I don't own. I honestly don't own every single Triple H T-shirt that ever came out because there were some that were pretty brutal. But John Cena fans are loyal to the end, and regardless of what weird color it was, light royal blue and orange. It's funny, Dave, because a few of Cena's color combos were my favorite sports teams. Like, I'm a Met fan, so there was royal blue and orange. He did a Laker one. He had Laker color, purple and gold. I don't know if he ever did a Bruins one. Did he ever do a black and gold? I don't think so.
No.
He never did a cowboy, but anyway, he did a few.
Never really saw him in black. I think they intentionally steered clear of the black because the black
That's a great point.
That would have presented more of the heel concept, I think.
I agree with you 100%. I think the only time he ever wore black is when he wore the football jersey that looked like Brian Pillman's, the black and orange football jersey. That was different. And if you remember, then they went to a camo football jersey. So they didn't stick. You're exactly right on that. They didn't stick with the black football jersey very long. But I think the main reason that Vince was afraid of pulling the trigger was merch. Because the average male wrestling fan is a lot pickier about his T-shirts and his merch than the Cena fan, which was mostly females and younger males who thought every T-shirt was cool looking. And the armbands, the wristbands, the headband, like all that crap. All that stuff catered to the younger demo, which is the demo that spends money. That's honestly what it comes down to, Dave. But our demographic didn't spend money like the younger demographic did.
But that, to me, I agree with you. But in the counter of that, Austin sold a ton of shirts as a heel, and not just. I know that he was a heel building the babyface in '96, but even in 01, he was turned heel and was still selling a ton of merch. Rock always sold a ton of merch as a heel. And I just. Yeah, and I guess you look at the NWO, and I know that was WCW, not WWE, but the fact of the matter is the NWO outsold probably anyone else's merchandise when they were in WCW, and that I think to say that by turning someone heel you can affect their merchandise sales, I think it can't be the whole story, because we've seen times when guys are heels and their merch is still sells through the roof. Maybe not as much as a babyface, but certainly sells through the roof. So I agree with you to an extent, but I think you can counter argue it by saying, hey, they've done it before. And then the counter argument comes back again that was the same argument that everyone was trying to put forward for Roman Reigns. Well, they're not going to turn him because of the merchandise, because he was. But they did it, and from all accounts, and I mean I only go off. I mean I'm not an insider, and I know neither are you, and I can only go off what you read. But what you read online seems to indicate that Roman Reigns is still amongst the best merchandise pushers as this heel character now, if not at the top. Like, he's certainly close to it. So that's at least some of the stuff that I've seen online and some of the little bits and pieces you see around. So, yeah, I agree with the merchandise thing. I agree that the younger kids, and there was an element of those guys, an element of the fan base that was with him at all times. And that, we had it was a 50-50, you got those 50-50 audiences. So it was never fully healed on. But, you can certainly argue that they've turned guys heel before and seen that it doesn't impact merchandise as much as they would think it does.
Mm-hmm. I think the difference there, though, Dave, to counter the counter of the counter, is that Austin's T-shirts were still cool looking, and anybody would still buy them. Whereas, again, unless you were a diehard Cena fan, no one was going to buy all that. Like, all the colors just were not colors that the average wrestling fan will wear. Listen, I'm not a fan of black wrestling T-shirts. I like different colors, but at the time it was all so bright. There were a couple that were cool. I know one, the T-shirt that kind of mimicked the AWA logo. That was a cool T-shirt. That's about it in that aspect. But I don't disagree with you that depending who the person was is how good the T-shirts carry over from face to heel. I will not disagree with you on that. But I do feel like Cena's merch did not carry over. Would not have carried over because maybe he'd have had cool T-shirts and maybe the fan base, the older fan base that would have dug him as a heel would have bought it. But, excuse me, the honest truth is, not the honest truth, but my opinion is, I don't think the merch would have carried over.
And I think, like I said, I think that's probably a fair reflection. You talk that the colors are not going to carry. They would have had to completely reinvent him,
right?
And I guess that's some of the things we're about to consider and look at what could have happened. But they would have had to reinvent him and redo all a whole new line of merch, and that it probably would have been very difficult to. It would have taken time to get the momentum behind it. Even a successful heel turn, they would have had to have changed all the colors, changed the shirts, changed what they were doing. And so the old merch would have been stuck with all this old merch that wouldn't have moved while you're waiting for anything new to come out. And they've got to work out, well, what's the new going to look like? So I think there's some strong points you've got there. So, but, look, we've a couple of times already, we've touched in on this, but let's really have a look at this. We want to look at, Scott and I are going to just spend a little bit of time. We're going to go through the glass now, and we're going to go through this looking glass of ours. And we're going to just look at, are there times that Cena could have, that things would have worked? A Cena heel turn would have made sense and would have worked, and how it might have looked. And I guess the first place I want to start, but I don't want to stay here long because I don't think I have a suspicion we'll probably agree on this. You mentioned before 06. You mentioned One Night Stand. He played into the heel character for that one night. But then we go back to who he was at Monday Night Raw. And, the question to be asked is 06 the right time frame? Now, I'm going to say it straight away, and I don't know if you'll agree with this. I don't think 06 would have been the time for a heel turn. I think that One Night Stand thing was a one-off. He played into it correctly. And then I think they were still trying to find the way to get him accepted by the fans, by all the fans again, which is, like I said earlier, they started doing the whole Monster of the Month and put Cena as the underdog and put him in all those situations that have worked over the years to get a guy over as a babyface. They hadn't done that with Cena yet. And so I think to turn him heel again in 06 would have been too soon. I think it would have been a signal that maybe Vince and the writers might have felt like they'd failed in their job if they'd turned him in 06. I think it was too early. I think that there was still a belief that if you got the right opponent, there'd be enough hatred of the opponent that would have everyone behind Cena. Would you agree with that, or are you a different opinion?
No, I agree with you 100%. The other thing that precluded that from happening is that they were lined up for him to have a rematch or a rebuilding feud with Edge. Edge was set, because the fans hated. They got pumped up when he pulled the trigger on the inaugural Money in the Bank at New Year's Revolution and won the belt, and then literally 2 weeks later, Cena wins the belt back at the Rumble, and everybody hated him. Edge would then, of course, enter into a feud with Foley. And Cena was slated to take on his first mega test of his medal as a champion, and that was, of course, Triple H, and they would have that match at WrestleMania 22 in Chicago, which Cena would win and would piss me off.
But therein lies part of where I'm coming from, is that they were trying to put him with guys that they believed. Yeah, you talked about the guys that the wrestlers that the guy fans liked, but and so that was part of the counter. But that's where I feel the company were trying to put Cena in the role of, well, everyone hates Hunter. Everyone hates Hunter. All the on-screen people, all the online people hate Hunter because of the political side of things. So the belief was, we put him against Hunter and Cena he'll be over, he'll be cheered. No, we won't get this 50-50 thing anymore. And obviously that didn't work. But but I think that to me, that's part of the point, is the whole series and feud with Hunter was their attempt to put him against someone they really believed the fans would not be cheering against Cena anymore, that they would all be on his side.
Correct. And that didn't work because Triple H got a killer pop at WrestleMania, and that, of course, would lead to him and Shawn reforming D-Generation X. The problem in 06 was, Dave, Edge was already the top heel on Raw. What would you have done with Edge if you had turned Cena heel in 06? You would have totally neutered Edge, and Edge had already gone through his babyface run for most of his mid-card years. Of course,
he just turned heel. He'd only just turned heel in the past 6 months.
Right. He turned heel. Well, no, he was heel. He turned heel in like late 04. Because he was a heel when he won the Money in the Bank at WrestleMania 21. So he'd been a heel for a while. Because you remember 05? Remember 05, he was dealing with all the Lita, Matt Hardy stuff. Yeah. So he'd been a heel for a while.
But he really found the character, I guess, by now, and he becomes someone, and I think there's very much in the classic Raven mold. People wanted to start to like him, and he could still get them to turn around and hate him. Cena, and Edge had become a master of that, and yet it didn't work with when he wrestled Cena. Well, that's another thing, but that's the thing, that the Edge heel character, he was one of those guys that had built that momentum and could get people to turn against him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So that's why I think 06 probably, I have to agree with you, probably not the best time to pull the trigger, because you already had a strong Edge as a heel, and turning Cena heel would have totally destroyed Edge because you wouldn't have had any. And I think the other issue was too, Dave, is that RVD, who I think Vince wanted to be a top babyface, fucked up and got himself pinched again.
Yeah.
For lighting up a little too much herb. And that was the end of that. So there was you would have left, Raw would have had an imbalance of not enough good baby faces and too many great heels. And so turning Cena heel in 06 would have totally imbalanced the creative 50-50 of the roster. So turning him heel in 06 just for the sake of it would have been a bad idea, I think, in the overall landscape of of Raw.
Yep. No, I agree. So we've got that out of the way. We just want to
Yep.
highlight to our listeners that, you know, people might say, well, what about 06? That's why not. So Scott, throw me one. What's one time that you feel that a Cena heel turn would have worked?
I think a great heel turn that would have worked. There were two. I have two on my mind. I'll go chronologically. The first one, and I think it kind of fit naturally. Might have been 2010 when the Nexus was going on. You know, at that time, he had spent most of 09 feuding with Orton because him and Orton always worked well together. But by 2010, you know, Cena would lose. He was champion. He'd lose the chamber. He'd win the chamber match. But then, you know, Vince came out to try to screw him, and he lost to Batista. They had a lukewarm match at WrestleMania 26 that was okay, but it wasn't great. So by then, I think Cena's face turn was definitely showing signs of losing steam. And you had this epic bunch of young studs that were on this new show they were doing, that you're trying to bring in fresh talent. And Cena could have, behind the scenes, said, listen, you guys are getting booed. Nobody likes you. Listen, I know how this feels. All right? And I'm starting to feel like I'm losing my way here. Maybe it's time for me to get things fired up in this place and take some control that I thought I had, but clearly I don't. And instead of the will he, won't he tease thing throughout the summer and then bury them all at SummerSlam 2010, and then, you know, the matches with him and Wade Barrett, and then the matches with Barrett and Orton in 2010, which would eventually lead to the Money in the Bank win for the Miz. Cena should have just gone out when they ripped the shit out of that epic end of that episode of Raw, you know, where Daniel Bryan's choking Justin Roberts with his tie, which led him to getting kayfabe fired. Cena should have come out, instead of getting beat up, they should have tore the place apart, and instead of beating Cena up, Cena should have smiled at them and said, that's exactly what this place needed. And just like Hogan did at Bash at the Beach 96, he raises the hands of Wade Barrett and Otunga and Tarver and all those guys. And then I think you would have seen some substantial heel heat.
Yeah.
Because the male fans didn't love all of the Nexus guys, but the women and the kids would have definitely, and also, you would have gotten the Nexus over as top flight heels going longer than they did, and you wouldn't have seen Nexus get buried by the end of the summer. And
by the end of the SummerSlam,
yeah, pretty much they're just cooked. Half of them get fired. They split them on other shows, turn them into the core, and then we know what happened after that. Yeah. You could have led this all the way into WrestleMania 27 instead of that very lukewarm, blasé Cena Miz feud. What you could have done was had Cena dominate Raw with the Nexus. Then you still could have had The Rock, and you still could have had the build to Rock and Cena. And instead, though, the night after Mania, Cena and the Nexus beat the crap out of The Rock. And say, see you in Miami next year, old man. And then you keep the Nexus hot throughout 2011, and then eventually you build it up to Rock and Cena, real heel, real babyface at WrestleMania 28 in Miami, and The Rock wins that match. Then, you could do whatever you want after that, but I think you could have really had a good build and a good stretch with Cena and the Nexus in 2010 to make them feel meaningful, get great heel heat, and have Cena take out somebody that is more liked than Cena was when he was a heel, when he was a face.
Yeah.
That's a risk you've got to take. You got to find somebody who was a better baby face than Cena was. And if you're going to build this Rock Cena match, instead of just doing this once in a lifetime, two baby faces throwing jabs at each other, yada, 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 you have Cena now wearing a suit and maybe even grow some facial hair because that's what heels do. And like, you know, maybe like have a gimmick or something where you set all of his ugly t-shirts on fire or some kind of symbol of the old John Cena's gone.
Yeah.
I am now an elder statesman here. I need to protect this company, and you people booing me is not making this easy. So to hell with you.
Yeah.
I don't know. What do you think? Was I reaching?
No, I think it works. I actually had 2010 as a year that would work from my opinion. So I'm in agreement with you. I might have taken it back a little bit earlier. I think you could have planted the seeds a little bit earlier. I watched that Batista Cena match as part of my my prep for today, and one of the things I agree, it was a bit lukewarmish. It didn't really seem to work. We know that Batista was building to leave. What I feel was the problem with that, part of the problem with that match was they did the sudden, well, we're gonna push Batista as the heel, have him lose on his way out the door because Batista was on his way out. Which, you know, that's typical booking. But I really wonder if it might have worked a bit better if you didn't try the semi-failed Batista turn, because at WrestleMania, he got a massive ovation when he came out. The fans were behind him for most of the match, like they always were.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you could have laid the seeds of the heel turn in the build-up between Cena and Batista. The whole thing that the fans keep cheering Batista over Cena, that, you know, he could even, you know, Batista could even start talking about how we go all the way back, like you said, to 2004 and 2005. And you remember that Royal Rumble that I beat you? You know, the fans cheered me more. Yeah, you could do that sort of Batista being the cool, smart aleck, still as the good guy, but hey, you know, nothing you can do can faze me. You could have these signs that throughout the build-up, Cena's starting to get more frustrated, starting to struggle a little bit more, that no matter what he does, you know, Batista is telling the truth. Mm-hmm. At Mania, you're still, you know, both of it. You don't do the heel turn yet, but maybe at Mania you got the match pretty well as it was, and the fans didn't react very well. And Batista on the way out, you can still have Cena win it, but you could have Cena win it maybe with he won by submission, and I don't think anyone liked that. It didn't. I mean, it was the way of, you know, Batista's gone. We know he's gone, so he tapped out. But maybe you could have had Cena struggling to get the win, like he did. Like they both gave each other the finishes. You almost very much like the Austin Rock finish, where it's like Austin got more and more frustrated that he couldn't put Rock away. You could have Cena getting frustrated, he can't put him away. I wouldn't go the full on again. He finds a way to win by cheating. He pulls the tights. He puts a foot on the rope, or he does something that is a bit heelish, but he doesn't completely play into it yet. And then, so he's almost what you've got in that one night stand thing, where he starts to play it to the crowd during the match, but he's still the good guy character. And then coming out of it, you've got that build, like you've got everything I do, you all keep booing me, you know, this place isn't what it meant to be. And you could lead into then you can build into what you did, what you suggested with the Nexus. I think that you could build it out, but I think you could lay the foundations of it with that, almost turn him heel in the Batista match, But with what you presented with, I loved what you presented with. He takes control of, runs Nexus and brings them in. I think that works even better. And so you could lay the foundations, and then coming out of Mania, start to build it into, well, I'm going to get these guys, and they're going to, I'm going to show, they're going to see that the fans aren't worth it. And now, and so he takes control, and that Nexus, that the final element of the heel turn is him coming out, like you said, and working with the Nexus that night and raising their hands and like, we're the unit. And this, you could probably, that would allow all the stuff you said after that. They run rush shot for months and months, and he beats up Michaels, and he beats up Sean, and he beats up, face after face. And, you could even do the whole, Bret Hart, he could beat up Bret Hart. He doesn't even need to be a match.
Yes.
They could just do it as an angle, beat up Bret Hart, and beat up, all these guys. And maybe even the Nexus do a beatdown on the Undertaker at SummerSlam or Survivor Series or something like that, or Royal Rumble. Like, you could do a different elements where he targets all those long-term faces, all those long-term guys that everyone's cheering, to build to, and here comes The Rock. The Rock is that last vestige, that last guy that the fans are behind, and he hasn't been able to take down yet. It's almost like the John Cena's revenge on the fans is to take out everyone that they cheer over him, and build to The Rock. I think that would have worked really well.
And you know what I want to support on that, on your theory there, Dave. You know who was, and I remember saying this a lot, who was really getting over as a pretty big face the back end of that year? Randy Orton.
Yes.
And I think you could, because I feel like Cena and Orton can't be faces or heels at the same time. And you could build to Rock. Cena could eventually win the belt, and you could have Rock help Cena, or Rock help Orton at some point win the world title and lead to their match at Mania. And if you don't want Cena to lose, they seem to kind of tease the fact that Vince kind of liked Wade Barrett as the face of the Nexus. You could have had him be world champion at some point and have maybe either at Survivor Series or at the 2011 Rumble, you have Orton win the title and go, and maybe Orton feud with Miz. Because I feel like Miz cashed in on Orton, and Orton never really got that match back.
No.
Like, he must have at some point. I don't think it was the Rumble. Maybe it was the Rumble. No, he wrestled Sheamus at the Rumble, I think. I don't remember. But I feel like Orton never really got that shot back. So you could have, instead of, you could have had one of the Nexus maybe win the Money in the Bank. Or you could have, there's so many. We could go down this rabbit hole. Of course, we can go down through this very long looking glass. We have some other looking glass. We have some other looking glass possibilities we got to discuss. But you could have done something with the title or whatever. But I love your thinking of the that Orton had the Legend Killer tour. Cena had the fan revenge tour. I'm going to take out everybody that you like more than me, to the point where you have to like me because there's nobody left.
Yeah. And of course the walk along storyline with that would then be, because you're building Nexus and he's working with them, is someone like Wade Barrett. And I always liked Wade Barrett. I think there was a lot of upside to him. You could have done the classic second in charge, who's really the leader sort of thing. So you could have, in the longer term, then you could have either built that Wade Barrett starts getting, the fans maybe start to see Wade Barrett as something good, and then Cena maybe turns on him, and you could have built Wade Barrett to the point that he gets booted out of Nexus and he and Cena feud, or Wade Barrett wants to usurp control. And that could be your final way to turn Cena back to a babyface in the future, would be he gets booted out when, because of how over Nexus are, Wade Barrett is maybe now the guy who is jealous of Cena, wants to run the show, and now they boot him out. It was never about you, Cena. It was always about us. and you're just holding us back the way everyone else did, and now we're going to take you down too. So he sort of, after Cena beats everyone else, you could have Wade Barrett be the one to sort of, now I'm going to, one way or the other. He could either turn Wade Barrett face and you boot him out and they feud, or you could have Wade Barrett rise up and be the turn on Cena as the, you were never one of us, even up these 2 years or 18 months or however long you've been working with us, it was always us and not you. And then you move on from there, and you've built Barrett up and probably a couple of other members of the Nexus in the process.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I think the whole having the Nexus turn on him to get him back to babyface could be very interesting. I kind of dig that. So, all right. So we can establish that 2010 is a pretty solid option for John Cena to turn heel. Okay. You go next, Dave. We'll snake it. What's your what?
All right. Well, I'm going to move us. I'm going to move us ahead 12 months. I'm going to put us into I'm going to put us into 2011. Okay. We've already done a full episode on the CM Punk, the Summer of Punk in 2011, and if you haven't listened to it, I encourage you go back into the archives and listen. That was a really fun episode.
It was absolutely.
It was, but I think the Summer of Punk highlights another opportunity, because Punk had been built up so much, and that win over Cena at Money in the Bank was such a great moment. And we've talked about how they botched the storyline coming out. I think coming out of Money in the Bank, you could have, I think you had another opportunity for a Cena heel turn, because Punk was very quickly had moved into that number one babyface role. And part of Punk's anger and frustration had been at how Cena consistently gets presented at the top of the card, and no matter what, he's at the top. And I love, one of the things I really loved in the build to that Money in the Bank match was CM Punk's line in one of his promos where he's talking to, and I think it was the first week when he did I think it's the pipe bomb promo, where he basically says to Cena, "You've become everything you despise. You've become the New York Yankees. That you've become the franchise. You always wanted to be not seen in that role, but you're the franchise player and you're the dynasty now." And I always loved that line. I always thought, could you imagine if coming out of Money in the Bank, the build coming out of there ended up being the development of the Authority, Triple H getting Nash in, and then Triple H himself, sort of Cena ends up dealing with Nash and Hunter and all that in the following months. And we talked about that before. But imagine if, in his frustration at what happened, and maybe even some of the realization that maybe some of the things Punk said was true, imagine if Triple H utilizes John Cena as the face of the Authority. You come out, you've got that build to SummerSlam. They do the tournament. Cena wins the tournament. We have our rematch, which wasn't as good, but is okay. But imagine if going through that tournament, all of a sudden it became Hunter is supporting and backing Cena, and he wants Cena to win it because Cena is the franchise. He has been our face. He has been for all these years the face of the company. When all the fans, you didn't like it, we still pushed him as the face of the company because he presents well. He has a good image. He's good on camera. He's good with the kids. And he's the man we want as our front guy. So all of a sudden he's got Cena pushing him and Hunter pushing him, and Cena plays into it. He accepts it. He starts working with Hunter. He starts maybe wearing the suits, the dressing up a little bit nicer. And then instead of getting this Kevin Nash crap that we got, you could play into everything is about the Authority trying to get Cena back into that position. And and Punk consistently knocking it down. And then Punk can have his matches with Alberto, and he can move on to the Jericho stuff, but the whole way through, that Cena is the front man for the Authority, so that Hunter doesn't have to get in the ring. It's Cena who does the work. Cena is that franchise player. And so when you move into 2012 and you have that SummerSlam match with Daniel Bryan, where they brought in Orton afterwards, you could have just done it with Triple H. Cena is anything that Hunter does, it's to benefit Cena, because Cena is the image that the company wants to portray. And if he played into it, I think you would have had a really interesting story arc of Cena, the corporate sellout. Cena, the guy who he doesn't have to change a heck of a lot, because he can still be pushed as, he can still be appearing in interviews and still dressing nicely for interviews on the Today Show and on the, morning shows and whatever other interviews they want to get him to do. He can almost play up I haven't changed. This is who I've always been. And I've always been the man who's put the company first. And I'm just continuing to do that. But, it's these other guys that, the fans, I'm still for you fans. I'm still working for you, because Punk is just he's a rebel. He puts, he's trying to cause trouble here, or Daniel Bryan doesn't fit the image. And so he doesn't suit it, or whoever they wanted to put him against, he could play the corporate role in a way that hadn't been seen before.
I kind of like that. Actually. The only thing that concerns me there is, do you eventually get the Rock match, or do you say, or is that something we save or blow off or never happen? If we take that out of the equation, and that's fine, because I was ambivalent to it anyway.
Well, again, the Rock thing can come out with the whole you bailed on the company. I mean, you've got some of the elements that they used in the reality of the storyline anyway. You bailed on the company. You left. You went to Hollywood, and I've been the man who's held this company together while you've been off in Hollywood. You can still build to that match.
Yeah, good point. And
it plays into the history between Rock and Hunter as well.
Yes. Yes, definitely.
Because I love that there's that classic. I think it was a Raw. It was a backstage segment where Hunter was in the office and Rock comes in, and they do the whole, I'm better than you. And it was almost that groundwork for they're going to have another match at some point, but they never did. You could use that same sort of promo, but, well, you're going to face my man. You can face John Cena.
Okay. I'm game for that. I think that would work. I think it would definitely put Punk over as the new face, as a a top flight guy. His gear sells. So if you're going to sacrifice, maybe Cena's merch taking a hit because he's a heel, particularly with Triple H, who nobody likes, and I only would be the one buying his shirts. Maybe I would buy Cena's shirts. Maybe he'd gained one new customer if he lost all of the kids. But Punk stuff sold just as much as Cena stuff by 2012. So I think that's a wonderful idea. I don't think you change anything else creatively. I still think you have Sheamus win the Rumble and do the whole thing with Daniel Bryan, because, that's on the other show. I think that would make a fascinating matchup a fascinating WrestleMania in Miami. So that would be different. I think it'd be very different. I think I like that plan, Dave. I think that works good for it. It benefits Punk. We didn't really, and I'm glad that you brought that up, because, again, please, I reiterate what Dave said. If this is your first episode of the show you're listening to, again, welcome. But start from the beginning after this. And our debut episode was about the Summer of Punk 11 into 12. So please check it out after you finish this one. But we didn't really delve into the whole Cena stuff or who else would be a heel really at that time. We kind of just meandered through Punk and different types of opponents for him. But having Cena in that role in late 11 as now you are the franchise. Now you're the thing you hated 9 years ago. You bitched and moaned about, I'm fresh, I'm ruthless aggression, The Rock's gone, Stone Cold's gone, all this other stuff. We're in a new era of WWE creative, and now fast forward 9 years, and you're the Triple H, you're The Rock, you're the Stone Cold. And the thing that you hated 9 years ago, you are now.
Yeah.
I'm you. And that's why I'm you, John. And that's why everybody likes me and nobody likes you.
And imagine, I've just had this thought. Imagine a T-shirt. I mean, we talk about merchandise, but imagine and I know there would be, it maybe wouldn't sell as much, but Cena coming out wearing a T-shirt that basically has like the Yankees, the Patriots, and him. Sort of like, because that's who the franchise were. The Pats, which is New England, where he's from, the Yankees that have dominated baseball over the years, and then himself. You've got this image of I'm the franchise, I'm the best of the best. It would generate heat. It would generate heat big time. All the people that hate the Pats.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. And him being a Boston guy, that's even better. Then you kind of take the pop culture aspect of it, connect him with arguably the most hated franchise of everybody at that time in the NFL. And then on top of it, compare him to a team that he himself probably despises. So I like that, Dave. I like that a lot. All right. My other option that I had in my head is also an authority-driven situation, but we're fast-forwarding a couple of years. I'd like to fast-forward to 2014. We're after the Daniel Bryan stuff, because obviously the easy heel turn would be instead of Orton as the chosen one, you make Cena the chosen one at that TLC 2013, turn him heel. He's the authority puppet, and he puts over Daniel Bryan in the middle of the ring at WrestleMania in New Orleans. But I don't totally like that idea. I actually like what actually ended up happening. So I'm going to leave that one alone. However, I'm going to go fast forward to the back end of 2014. Okay. And we get to Survivor Series and the whole Authority versus Cena's crew and everything and all that shit with Dolph Ziggler and all these guys. And of course we know on that night, Sting would make his debut. His debut. And the next night on Raw, kind of the same thing with the Seth Rollins heel turn earlier in the year. You have a Sting come out, face Triple H the night after Raw, and say, "I'm here to, you're one of the reasons I never wanted to come here." And Triple H goes, "Well, that's okay. I got somebody that's better than you anyway and always will be." And John Cena comes out and beats the shit out of Sting. And instead of Triple H and Sting at WrestleMania 31 in Santa Clara, you've got Sting versus John Cena, the corporate face of WWE. And I think you would get a ton of heel heat out of that. We don't need to deal with any Taker, Triple H, Sting, and DX and NWO and all these extra fucking guys and all this crap. You have the Authority, the face of WWE. This is WWE, Sting. This is not WCW. Maybe you were the face of WCW. Hell, you were the face of Impact. But you will never be the face of WWE. And as for Undertaker and Steve Austin and The Rock and all these other guys that you had to go up against back in those days, none of them can hold a candle to me. And you're just a broken down old Eric Draven wannabe. Eric Draven, of course, is the character in The Crow, for those of you that don't know. And why you came here now, I have no idea. Probably to get a paycheck and some T-shirts. But the fact remains is I am the face of this company, not Steve Austin, not The Undertaker. Like, fire off all the good baby faces. I am. I always have been, and I always will be. And just because the fans don't want to buy my T-shirts anymore, at this point in my career, I'm all about being the face. He could say that. He could say the face that runs the place before AJ Styles did.
Yeah.
And at WrestleMania 31, I am going to drop you. I'm going to take your crappy memory of being the face of that crap company, WCW, and I'm going to bury it like Vince wants me to. And you even have Vince starting to come out as part of the Authority. And you have Cena be the ultimate sellout scumbag. And be like, some of our fans kind of like WCW. Well, they're idiots. They were idiots in 1997, 98 when they watched it, and they're idiots now for cheering you broken down old man. And they could really lay the wood on Sting for the next few months. And then you have this amazing Sting-Cena match at WrestleMania 31. And I don't care who wins. Doesn't matter to me. I guess it depends on how far you want I guess it depends, Dave, on how far you want it to go. If you want it to end right there, then you just have Sting win. But if you want to carry it over to, say throughout 2015, maybe hold off on Seth Rollins winning Money in the Bank, and instead you have Cena win Money in the Bank, and he's always carrying the briefcase. And then suddenly, out of nowhere, he's the one that wins the WWE title. And he's the one that holds it throughout 2015. And he's the one that goes face-to-face with Roman Reigns at WrestleMania 32 in Dallas, not Triple H. And then you get the crossing over, Dave, of generations.
The passing of the torch.
Yeah, the guy who currently is getting shoved down our throats versus the guy that used to get shoved down our throats. But maybe, Dave, with heel Cena, you perhaps get a stronger babyface Roman Reigns.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of merit to that. I think that would work really well. I like the idea of the franchise versus the franchise and Cena working Sting. I think with Sting, I think that one of the things that would have helped is John Cena's style of wrestling, I think would have suited Sting a lot better than, unfortunately, what he ran into with Seth Rollins down the track. I think Seth being a lot more athletic and just the way he approaches, we know that Sting got hurt, and I know there was no intent, but I don't know that he would have had a similar issue against Cena, because Cena doesn't work that style of match. Would have worked a match that very well would have played to Sting's strengths. So I think you would have had a really good match at Mania. I think you would have had it would have created a good dynamic, and you could play into that franchise tag. Here is the franchise player from WCW, and Cena building the whole storyline around, like you said, this isn't WCW. I'm the franchise here. I'm the king. I'm the boss. I'm the one in charge. And again, carry it through to to the following year and this upstart Roman Reigns, and you're trying to take what's mine. This is my empire. You know, you walk around calling it your yard, but this is my empire. Your yard's in my empire, and allow. Yeah, it might have seen that Reigns may have received a bit more of a favourable reaction. Although I think they would have hoped the same thing against Hunter. So, you know, again, that comes down to how they booked Roman. But again, maybe if they had pumped a Cena heel turn at some point, the backlash might not have been as severe against Roman, because what all the fans were annoyed at is, apart from the fact that we had the Daniel Bryan issue the year before, but I don't think that ever really. That impacted Batista more than it did. I mean, the year before where it impacted Batista, and Roman was being cheered then. Then he's being pushed, and the whole, we want Bryan should be there. You know, I think that if they'd done a Cena heel turn earlier, or even as part of this storyline, maybe the backlash might not have been as much, because people would be sitting there going, but they did eventually turn Cena heel, and right now we're happy that he's a heel, and we want Reigns against Cena. We want to see that. We want to see that, and we'd like to see Roman get up. They could keep Roman in that underdog sort of role and build him up a bit more. So I think it would have worked, because it would allow them to redo the storyline a little bit with Roman Reigns' build, and maybe have him presented in a little bit of a different way. So right. I like that one. I think that one would work well. Also, I think we've come up with some good ideas there.
Absolutely. Though honestly, at this point, and then at that point, Dave, I don't think there's any other options, because at that point, by the time you get to 16, 17, he's kind of part-time at that point. And AJ Styles gets here. They have that feud. I'm fine keeping Cena face for that. And then that's pretty much that. By that point, by 2018 or whatever, Cena's pretty much a
I agree with that. I think once you get post 2016, there's something that alters in the crowd. I think post 2016, people, number one, people have accepted that it's never going to happen. But because Cena, in fact, I actually think the change happened a little bit earlier. I'm going to get to this in just a minute. Let me do my last thought process, and then I want to talk about. Want to talk about. Look, this is just a short one. This isn't. I mean, look, I raised this as a way that Cena could have been booked as a heel that I think would have worked. That would have made for an interesting storyline. But we don't need to spend too much time into that. And that realistically is just taking it into, I'd probably utilize it in 2014. But it could have been done any year. You could do it any year. And that really is, tie him in with the Undertaker's streak. You could have, a way to turn Cena heel would have been to have him go after the streak and to turn heel in doing it. So not the whole Shawn Michaels or Triple H thing of, I've got to prove myself or I've got to do this, but very much the whole Undertaker, this is, you talk about this being your yard, but until I beat you, I've got to beat you at Mania to prove who I am. But then in the process of it, not trying to do it as realizing he can't do it without turning heel, he's got to turn heel. And you get a full-on heel turn at the beginning of the build-up. And Cena can start cutting promos on Undertaker about being a part-timer, about not being around. And you could, like I said, you could do this in 14. You probably could have done this anytime from about 2008 or 2009. This storyline would work anytime between 2009 and probably 2014, 2015. If you didn't have him take a lose to Brock, you could have taken it a year or two longer. But I think anywhere in that time frame, you do a storyline where it's about he's coming for Taker's streak. The fans wouldn't. because we talked about this. We've talked about this when we talked about Taker's streak, how the fans would. It was always that image of, well, would they put Cena over because he is, has the way they push him? It could very easily have been something that would have been acceptable, and the fans wouldn't have wanted it. So they could have played into it and had Cena turn heel in the process of going for it, but you have Undertaker beat him to keep the streak intact whenever they face. I wouldn't have had Cena take the streak, but I think a heel turn going for the streak would have worked.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a very easy and clear way to turn to get Cena to turn heel. Somewhere in that stretch, I hate to take away either of the Shawn Michaels matches or either of the Triple H matches from WrestleManias 25 through 28. But somewhere in that window, I think you could see Cena break the streak. Because after that, it wouldn't have worked. Like, for instance, because at that point, Cena was already established. And if you think people got pissed off in New Orleans for Brock breaking the streak, imagine if in the mid-2010s you had Cena break the streak. Then you really would have imploded the company.
But I don't think he would have needed to have broken the streak. He could
exactly,
have,
and I think
turned
that's
him
the
heel
point.
and made it work. Mm.
Right, but I think a good spot, maybe, Dave, you could have done it. Maybe Shawn and Taker don't have the rematch in Phoenix, and you build to Cena, Cena and Taker at 26, but see, that would have been tough. Somewhere in that 4-year stretch.
What if you were to play off it? What if you were to play off it?
Mm-hmm.
The two Michaels matches happen. The following year, Hunter can't get it done. But instead of doing the second Hunter-Taker match, you have Cena coming out that year saying, Michaels tried 2 years in a row. He couldn't do it. He's considered one of the best ever. Hunter came out last year. He couldn't do it. He's considered one of the best ever. I'm better than both of them. I'm better than both of them would ever have been. He can start doing some of his heel rappy style to do some of this. And he's basically, I am the greatest that has ever been, and I'm going to prove it when I take down The Undertaker. And then, maybe when The Undertaker does one of the confrontations, like, he always had the lights go out, he turns up, he stares them all down, and that's all he does. In the middle of that, Cena picks up a chair and wallops him, or hits him with bras, cheap shots him and does a beatdown to solidify the heel turn, and then run from there. But you could do it after Hunter didn't get the win either, because then it can really play into Cena being I'm the best of the best. I'm gonna do what they couldn't.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you could have cemented Cena as the guy. And I think fans down the line would probably not have regretted it, nor would the company have, because I still think deep in people's minds, I still think they're pissed off that it was Brock Lesnar that did it. And then eventually, obviously, 3 years later, him and Roman would have that match in Orlando. That's not very good, and that's well documented in the Undertaker: The Last Ride documentary, because Taker admits that he was not in the best shape. He couldn't execute any moves. I mean, he was a shit show. So
and we talked about that when we did our Undertaker episode, when we did our streak episode a couple episodes ago.
Yeah. We talked about it as part of our Mania episode. So I think there were definitely, I think we've come up with some great examples, Dave, of in Cena's prime, even reaching the lip of 2014-15 when he was just finally starting to level out as an everyday worker and slowly starting to get into moderate part-time status by, say 2017, he'd have that tag match with Nikki Bella, which of course is a mess because they're not together anymore. And then New Orleans, he doesn't even wrestle. Yeah, him and Taker have that 3-minute whatever that was in New Orleans, and then by WrestleMania 35, he's not even there. I was at MetLife, and he came out with the did the Thugonomics thing, which brought a pop because he came out with the Yankee jersey, with Babe Ruth jersey.
But therein lies where I was getting at before. I think sort of once we come through 2016, something changed with the fan base, and it was that realization that Cena's not being pushed down our throats anymore. He is a part-timer. He has earned respect. When he turns up, you're going to be entertained. And he moved into the element where the fans are happy to see him, and the fans do cheer him. And he turns up now, the fans cheer him. The fans like him. I mean, I was in Melbourne when he came out and did it. Did a thing with Elias at the Super Showdown down here in Australia. The place went nuts. He got the second biggest reaction of the night, behind Buddy Murphy when Buddy, the local boy, came out and won the cruiserweight title. But Cena has demonstrated, I think, since 2016 that he's earned the respect now, and because he's not the front face in every main event now, people are happy to see him because he only comes occasionally, and he's well received when he does come now. So it's turned full. So we've gone a full 360 degrees now, and people like Cena, and people want to see him, and people are happy when he comes out.
Yeah, absolutely. And at this point, I think obviously, Cena's made a great career for himself. We didn't get the natural heel turn, and we probably had. Again, probably 3 opportunities. I'll say our two 2010s and the 2011 kind of could blend into one, and I think the 14. I really like that my 14-15 leading into Cena Roman at WrestleMania 32. I think that would actually be pretty great. But we definitely don't like him in 2006. That's one thing we could both agree on. Especially. Because that one night he had at One Night Stand is so great. It seemed like a great snapshot that would not have been as well executed over a long period of time. Because you know what? The problem was RVD still would have got caught, and RVD still would have got caught. And they would have had to return Cena face, and then that would have been it. You wouldn't be able to do it again. So, of all of our discussions tonight and all of our scenarios, I think not turning him heel in 2006 is still the safest. I think is an absolute bona fide yes. Not turning him heel is correct. But I like our other options. Anything else, Dave? Anything else we can add here to the back end before we exit stage?
No, I think that's a pretty good. I think we've done a pretty good job of throwing out a couple of ideas, and like I said at the beginning, I think we've seen that the way. I think we've seen that it would have worked because WWF have proven that they can still do it with how they dealt with Roman Reigns. And I think one of the things I'll say, I've made it. People who've listened before know I'm not very high on the current product. I really struggle watching the current product. But if there's one thing I will give credit to, it is how they have done this Roman Reigns heel turn and how they have built it over the past, what is it now, 18 months? We're coming up to 2 years nearly, aren't we, of this heel run, and it is a compelling character, and it's really, they've done a very good job with it, and it's changed a lot of people's perceptions of Roman Reigns. So I think they learned their lesson from John Cena, and I think they've realized that sometimes you've got to go with what the crowd are wanting, with where there might be a little bit of short-term struggle in the initial stages. In the longer term, it's going to play out better. And I think that's what we've seen with Roman Reigns, because he really now is the face of the company. And John Cena, and all that time, John Cena was presented as the face, but I don't think it was until just as he moved into that part-time role that he was ever really accepted as it was probably around the time of Rusev, the whole US Open Challenge thing, that people were really willing to accept that Cena was the number one guy from a fan standpoint. Everyone was always looking to try, is there someone else? And it was sort of at that point, it was like, I guess he is the number one guy.
Exactly. Well, everybody, I hope you enjoyed this trip through the Looking Glass. We knew a Cena heel turn episode was inevitable, and I think we did a pretty good job. I think we did some good justice. Dave, where can everyone find you?
As always, you can catch me lurking the Facebook pages and the chat pages. I'm Dave Hall on Facebook, and you'll see me lurking around. And feel free to drop me a message, hit me up for a chat, reach out to me. I'd love to hear your feedback and all that. You can also hear me on a pretty regular, but probably almost every 2.5 weeks over on the North-South Connection Network. The No So Daily, you'll hear me popping up once every couple of weeks on No So Daily. By the time this drops, I think this is dropping the day after this episode drops. You're going to hear me over. You can catch me over on the No So Network. I'm going to be looking at the classic Jake the Snake Roberts versus Randy Macho Man Savage from Saturday night's main event in 1986. I've got that match. I'm going to be reviewing that match, so that's going to really encourage you to pop over and listen to that. So, and you never know, I might be popping up elsewhere soon. We might just I might just leave that as a little subtle a little seed to be planted. You might hear me in another featured podcast on this network very soon.
Yes, I like the sound of that as well. Listen, and when you reach out to Dave, or of course reach out to our Twitter at PTBN Wrestling, if you have a Looking Glass idea, Dave and I are open to suggestions. If you're listening to this show for the first time and this is your first episode, listen to the others before you reach out to Dave for an idea, because we may have already done it. So when you listen to all the episodes and you think you may have a pretty good, you think you may have an idea that you think Dave and I would like to do, reach out to Dave, or reach out to me on Twitter at Scott C. Podfather, or of course on the brand Twitter at PTBN Wrestling, and let us know what you would like us to, what journey through the Looking Glass you'd like Dave and I to do. I know Dave's already got one in his head for this coming June. We have a couple through the summer, but once we get into the fall, we're going to definitely need some. We're definitely going to need some ideas. So please reach out to us. Let us know what you think of the show. Of course, let us know what you think of all the shows here on the PTB Wrestling Network. It's been a big week here. We have a new episode this coming week of this week. That today's Wednesday. If you're listening to this when it drops, tomorrow Thursday we have a new episode of Highway to the Impact Zone. Friday, new episode of NWA Crock and Roll. Of course, this weekend, new episode of the NWA Saturday Special. That Always Ready pay-per-view is building and building, and Dr. G and I'll give you all the details on it. And all the other great shows here on the PTB Wrestling Network. So, everybody have a wonderful Wednesday here in the middle of May. Enjoy, when we talk to you again, it'll be in June, so enjoy your Memorial Day weekend at the end of the month. Just remember to remember all of those who sacrificed to give us that holiday here in the States. And we will talk to you in June when we travel again through the Looking Glass.
fell off. I'm still hot, knock your shell off. My money stacked fat, plus I can't turn the swell off. The franchise doing big business, I live this, it's automatic, I win this. So you hear those horns, you finish. A soldier, and I stay under you fighting. Plus I'm storming on you chumps like I'm thunder and lightning. Ain't no way you breaking me, kid, I'm harder than nails. Plus I keep it on lock like I'm part of the jail. And slaughtering stale competition, I got the whole block wishing they could run with my division, but they gone fishing with no bait. Kid, your boy hold weight, I got my soul straight, I brush your mouth like Colgate. In any weather, I'm never better. Your boy's so hot, you never catch me in the next man's sweater. If they hate, let them hate. I drop your whole clan. Lay your ass down for the 3 second tan. Your time is up, my time is now. You can't see me, my time is now. It's the franchise where I'm shining now. You can't see me, my time is now.
It's gonna be what it's gonna be. 5 pounds of courage, bloody base, 10 pants with a gold tee. It's a war dance, a victory step. A raw stance is a gift, and you insist it's my rep. John Cena trademark, y'all are so-so. And talk about the bread you make, but don't know the recipe for dough, though. Aiming guns in all your photos, that's a no-no. When this pop, your lip lock, your big socks are blatant no-so. See what happens when the ice age melts. You see monetary status is not what matters, but it helps. I rock a timepiece by Benny, if any. The same reason y'all could love me is the same reason y'all condemn me. A man's measured by the way that he thinks, not clothing lines, ice links, leather and minks. I spent 20 plus years seeking knowledge of self. So for now, Mark Frederick's living life for wealth.
Your time is up, my time is now. You can't see me, my time is now.